Okay, it's being recorded. And Courtney, now we have a quorum. So let's see, Joe, Larry, Julia, and Courtney and myself. Okay. All right, welcome everybody to the EDC meeting September 3rd. Let me just put up the agenda. If you can all see this. Sorry. The agenda is, we'll have brief citizen comments again as usual. Unless we run out of time, we'll have citizen comments throughout the, on each topic. But if you have other comments you want to make at the beginning, that's fine. We'll have a quick financial update, a quick update on the Business Relief Fund, and then we have two sets of grant requests. One is for the River Trail to release some additional funding of the full funding that we had promised them. And then three related but separate grants from the chamber to help them recover from their loss of revenue due to the cancellation of events and other things. And then one discussion about competitive bidding requirements for EDC and grantees, a continuation of our discussion from last meeting. And then any new business that we have. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? I would like to add one item, which is a brief discussion of the state plan to provide $30 via some gift certificate to merchants, to citizens in Woodstock or in every town, who can then use it for registered businesses who have registered to receive the $30. It's a form of consumer spending stimulus. And we only have a few days to kind of encourage that. So I just want to discuss that briefly. And I also want to discuss briefly a grant proposal that we submitted. So those two items. Any other additions or deletions to the agenda?
Hey, John, did the select board meet at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock?
6 o'clock.
Is there any thought to discussing us doing that?
Let's put it on the agenda. Let's just add that to the agenda.
Okay.
Okay, Sally, so you'll remind us of those three items. The two items that I had will be very quick, and this one could last for a long time, but okay. Any other additions or deletions? No, hearing none. Okay, the minutes are, by the way, everyone, the EDC website now has the links to this meeting, and it has all the documents for today's meeting. And that link on the website will always, well, essentially always be for the next upcoming meeting. So as soon as we clear it out from this meeting, you can always go to that to have the link, the Zoom link if it's by Zoom, and any of the documents for the meeting on that page. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from August 6th from the last meeting?
Motion to approve, Courtney.
Courtney has made a motion. Larry, you can second it. Larry will second it. Any discussion? Nope, hearing none. All in favor? Aye, if you can raise your hand so I can see. It's unanimous. We don't have to take a roll call. Yeah, it's unanimous. Okay, any opposed? None opposed. Okay, the minutes are approved. A brief financial update. Sally, do you want to give us a quick update?
I don't really have much to say. I'm still working with Zoe to make sure that what I'm showing for the balances are what actually is in the town accounts. So we're still working on that. The only thing that I will say, I received a report from her about what's happened in this quarter, and it seemed to indicate that we received a $20,000 local options tax payment from the state for the second quarter of 2020. She did not confirm that, but that's what it looks like. So that's, quarter of what we had last year, but it's better than nothing. So other than that, the financial situation has not really changed significantly.
So just to elaborate on that briefly, this is the first, so it is the second quarter of the year, but in our spreadsheet, it's the third of 4 payments that we use to consider this year's budget. We made $360,000 of grants against what we thought would be 4 payments that added up to $320,000 was what we forecast. We made that forecast in November. So up in the first two payments for this of the four added up to 130,000 or 135,000, which was more than you would think given the activity because the payments are delayed, meaning that they were for prior months. So this third payment of 20,000 as opposed to say 80 means that we're at 150. And if we get another payment of 30 or 40, if we think that the next payment will be more active than the last, then we would be at 180, which would be about $150,000 less than we thought we would earn, and therefore would cut $150,000 out of our excess funds, of which we had about 300,000, something like that. So it's all a moving target. We have money. We're not exceeding our resources, but our surplus is declining. And but one last, Courtney, I'll call you in a second. This is one last thing. This is the first time we can, I think, accurately measure the impact of COVID-19 on the part of our economy, which represents the merchants, and it's down by 75%. And that's probably, my guess is, and Courtney, you could comment on this or others could, but that's probably the worst 3 months. Sally, would that be for April, May, and June?
Yeah. Second quarter.
Yeah. So, Courtney?
Yeah, that was my question, what months they were. So April, May, and June, pretty much all of us were shut down. So July, August, September should be a lot better.
So, okay, any other comments or questions about the financials? Okay, Sally, while you're unmuted, do you want to just talk briefly about the Business Relief Fund, and then Joe or Michael? Oh, Michael's not on, but Joe, if you have anything to add, but go ahead, Sally.
Yep. Actually, there really hasn't been any activity for the Business Relief Fund. I had some inquiries in August from a couple of nonprofits and a business, but there was no action. So the balance in the account remains at $54,200. I think there may have been 4 loans that were repaid, but again, I do not have that information because they go directly to the town, and it's not called out on my report that I received from the town who repaid. I know there were 3 repaid, but I'm not sure about the 4th one.
Okay. And how many, 4 out of 45 or something?
Yeah.
So I think there's a prospect, given what's happened and that we said we would come back in 12 months, which would be, next spring and summer. I think there's a prospect we might pick up another, 10 or 15,000 from 10 or 15 people.
Yeah, I think that's possible.
But we
Definitely.
shouldn't count on it, and we shouldn't feel badly if we pick nothing up. Any comments about Business Relief Fund? Any suggestion that we make any changes to it, or we just leave the funds in the balance as we've done for the last 3 or 4 months? If we have to, in my opinion, we have to take action to change that. Otherwise, the relief fund still exists.
So we're all in agreement to keep it going.
Yeah, we're proposing for another month. I think each month we've discussed this.
Okay.
Yep.
I think we have to
And
put an end to it.
I will say that there were a couple inquiries this month. So there are definitely businesses and nonprofits especially that are in a different position than they thought they would be. So it may be that we'll still get some requests.
So the issue of a double dip is still in effect. Is that correct?
Yep.
Any other comments or
I just say I'm on all the calls. I'm on a lot of calls with all the administration for the Vermont Lodging Coalition. Kareem is on this call, right?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, so he's been very involved as well. There's definitely a lot of effort, at least for all of our lodging here in this region, in this town, that may get better aid than they were getting. There was definitely an imbalance. So we've got a lobbyist that's working hard for the hardest hit group in the state, in the world, so I should say that, to try to get more funds to that group as well as others. So there's definitely been a step up to get more into the marketplace.
Okay. Any other comments? I have no update on Woodstock Works. Perhaps more next month. We'll see. Okay. All right. Thank you, Sally. New grant requests. We have two. Let's start with the Otoquechee River Trail. Again, this is a request to release more of the original $45,000 grant. Tom, you can give us a brief explanation of why these additional funds, and just remind us what we've released a portion, I think $7,000 to do. Tell us what that has accomplished, and now tell us what this next tranche would accomplish and why we need it now.
So on the website, there was a document. It didn't look like many people had read it. So I'll offer a few things from that document. The opening paragraph really answers your question, which was the Otoquechee River Trail is requesting the release of an additional $7,500 from the $45,465 grant that was approved by the EDC in January. To date, the Otoquechee River Trail has received this $15,000. With the approval of this additional funding, the trail would have received a total of $22,500 in this calendar year, which would leave a balance of $22,965. So basically, it's a little under 50% would be the total amount of funds released. And as people know, we have been moving, we've been moving fast. We've gotten all of the state permits. We've gotten all the local permits and approvals. We've gotten the, we've gone through the Conservation Commission. We've gone before the Development Review Boards. We've had the approvals by the trustees and select board. The town and the village now provide the umbrella insurance. And with that, the 4 property owners have signed their licenses for us to be able to use the property. Once the releases and these licenses were gained, we started construction. We're well underway with construction, and we'll have an opening day on Labor Day. So 5 days from today, we will be open and ready. I do think what I did say in the request, given the realities of construction, some changes to the project plan have become apparent, and we've had to redistribute the funding a little bit. We also have a couple of additional requirements that we need. The trail kiosk is one. We have stairs at the trailhead, but we also want a ramp. The ramp will enable at least a portion of the river trail to be more accessible to strollers and possibly to disabled. That adds some cost, trail signage, and then finally some printing of maps. So all of those would enable us to be up and running and serving people starting on Monday. We've had great community involvement in the trail to date. We've had 3 volunteer weeks, and there have been 20 plus people that have come. We've had great coverage of this, whether it's in David Brown's app. The Woodstock Inn has a landing page for the river trail. The WoodstockVT.com, Katie Berdan has done a great job and included both the East End Park and the river trail. Coverage in Vermont Standard. Today it was announced on the front page, about the opening on Monday, in addition to a full article last week. And we also had coverage in the Valley News. So great community support. As we know, during this time, outdoor recreation is a key priority to the community. And so we'd like to go forward to request this $7,500 release from what was originally granted to us at the beginning of the year.
Okay, Tom, thanks very much. Any questions for Tom or any comments? First from EDC members. Michael, welcome. So,
I would just add that Tom has done a fantastic job of organizing all this, and he should be applauded for it. There's a lot of local people that have put in a lot of time and effort, plus the Upper Valley Trail Alliance that has done a superb job, and I'm very pleased with what I see.
I'm gonna ditto that. It's just Tom, you've done an amazing job, and everybody involved, everybody who's volunteered. It's been a long time coming. I think you go back to 2004 with this or something like that. So
2000, actually.
yeah, 2000. So it's going to be a wonderful thing. All of us are going to really enjoy. So it took a lot of parties to get it all together, and it's well worth continuing to invest in it at this point.
Thank you.
any other
Cool.
comments from EDC folks or questions? Anyone else?
John, I have just something to say too, if I could. Tom, I'm not sure, I got in late to the meeting, so I'm sorry, but I don't know if you mentioned Randy Richardson and all the work he did. He really organized these work days and it was just fantastic. Just what a
Isn't he great?
effort.
He is such a good person, you know.
Yeah.
Also, Jerry Frederickson has gone above and beyond, and we're just blessed. I mean, there really has been a community involvement, you know, and I appreciate the compliments to me, but really it has been team, and there's a lot. We're all going to benefit from it.
You bet.
Okay, hearing no other comments, then can I have a motion to, well, let's just vote. We'll have a motion to, can someone make a motion to, that we release the additional $7,500 as requested?
I'll move.
Joe is moving it. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Julia's seconding. All in favor, say aye, or sorry, raise your hand, please, so I can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, I'm counting myself. Okay, any opposed? No, there's no others. Okay, the motion passes.
Awesome. Could I just offer, and thank you all. I appreciate that. We have a volunteer day on Saturday, so 8 to 12. And then the open house is Monday. It looks like we're going to have great weather this weekend. We have an open house joint with the East End Park from 10 until 2. So love to see all of you and share more of the specifics about the trail. Thank you all.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, congratulations. I didn't realize this was a 20-year effort. I knew it was a long effort, but
It's a long one.
fantastic.
Okay.
Congratulations.
I'm going to sign off then. Thank you
very
all.
good. Thanks, Tom. Okay, the next item, I'll go back to the agenda. Sorry, give me a second. The next item is our 3 grant requests. If I can summarize them.
Yeehaw!
I'm sorry. Oh, can someone? That might be Tom. I'll mute. Tom, if it's you, I'm going to mute you. Also, whoever, I don't know if it's illegal, but whoever was earlier in the evening trying to kill their cat, that has not happened. There are three grant requests that the chamber has made. 2 of them to replace the expected profit from important events that could not have been held, Taste of Woodstock and the Pasta Dinner. And one of them to help to eliminate the back rent that has built up to allow the chamber to kind of start fresh as it tries to recover from the COVID experience and build a sustainable model. For those of you on the EDC and a handful of the others, I sent out a note last night. I don't know whether you've all seen it or not, but if it's all right with the group, I'd just like to take a couple of minutes to sort of summarize what was in that note to frame this discussion. And then I'll ask Beth, I guess, you to just explain the grant request. Well, maybe, yeah, let me just sort of frame the discussion. Then Beth, you can do the same thing that Tom did. Is that all right? Okay, I think you might still be muted, or maybe you were just talking quietly. So, okay.
Sure.
So 2 meetings ago, I think it was, we discussed in our public monthly meeting, setting aside or asking a small group of people to meet with the chamber, the 2 new co-chairs of the board, Isabel and Ray, and to talk about the relationship between the EDC and the chamber and the ways in which we could work together and make sure that, you know, we could optimize all of the things that we're collectively doing, where we share sort of similar, not identical, but similar objectives. We had several of those discussions, some emails exchanged back and forth, and then the chamber sort of submitted these grant requests, which is not inconsistent with the discussions that we had. But so I think we have a choice. I think we have 2 things facing us: specific grant requests that are being made this evening for specific items, and a broader sort of set of policy issues that maybe we're close to being able to resolve. And so these 3 requests are immediate. They relate to specific events. They're not recurring requests. These events presumably won't get canceled in the future. Hopefully they won't be. But the principles and the policies could endure and provide us with a foundation for deciding how much to fund the chamber. The fundamental issue, it seems to me, and this is what I put in my email, is that the chamber serves its members, but also undertakes a number of important activities to serve the community, not just its members. It organizes events, it runs the Welcome Center, it responds to inbound inquiries, like from the press or from people who want to set up a business or from people who want to move here or travel here. And it provides, in a few specific cases, some of the physical downtown amenities, like the lighting on the green or the flowers during the summer. And the question is, and the chamber has applied for grants in the past for some of those things, and we've granted many of those grants. And the town has given the chamber money to support them, but in particular to support the Welcome Center, and is going to continue to give them that money. And so the question that we've sort of been wrestling with for the last few years and in these offline discussions is, how much should the chamber how much of these costs should the chamber bear in providing services to the entire community? Those services benefit members of the chamber, but they also benefit others. And so that's sort of the question. And what I proposed is that we adopt a set of principles, not tonight, but soon, and that we adopt a set of principles that would govern how much government funding the chamber should get, whether it's from the town or from the EDC, in order to pay for these activities. And I'll just share with you, if you can still see the screen, these are the principles that I proposed. I'll just read them. Again, I'm not going to ask that we approve them tonight, but I'll just go through them and then I'll turn it over to Beth. The chamber, 5 principles. Principle number 1, the chamber should be compensated for some of the costs of the services that they provide to the town, these general services that benefit everybody. And they should bear some of the costs themselves, because these activities also provide benefit to their members, not just to the town at large. Second is that the town should, and this is not an EDC decision, this is Mary, you and Jill and the select board would have to agree to this. You have so far. The town should continue to fund the full cost of the Welcome Center, and from time to time review the operations to ensure that they're comfortable with it. The chamber should continue to bear the full costs of all of the events that it hosts and receive the full profits from those events. And Beth, you can describe it. In most years, most of the events you hold are profitable, and those should be yours. Funding from the EDC to the chamber should be directed at specific activities that are identified in advance that benefit the entire community to ensure that our objectives are pursued. And that funding from the EDC should be permanent rather than run through an annual granting process. And if we did this, it would provide some stability to the chamber. They would know what their budget is. It provides some stability to us. We wouldn't have to go through the process and so forth. It would allow us to make sure that there were no overlaps, which we don't think there are. We've examined it, and so forth. So when I saw these requests for the chamber grants, I wanted to bring up this issue that we've been dealing with on the side and bring it into this discussion. At tonight's meeting, we can disagree with these principles, say we don't need them at all. We can say we want to work on them, and therefore we want to wait 1 month to decide how much money to give the chamber, because we want to decide what the principles are, and that should dictate. Or we can say we want to do both. These principles are great. Let's talk about them over the next month or two, but let's respond to the chamber's grant requests immediately. Any of those things are fine with me. I just wanted to frame this discussion so that we could do that. So, all right, let me, Sally, just sort of points of order, and then I'd like to give Beth a chance to describe it. So Sally and Patrick, if they're brief comments, go ahead. Sally first, and then Patrick.
The only thing I would say is I did add to the EDC Dropbox the MOU that currently exists between the chamber and the town, which talks about the website and those sort of related social media. I mean, we already have a memorandum of understanding between the chamber and the EDC.
Yeah, and this would be added to that. I'm not suggesting we contradict that or change anything there. This would get added to that. So Patrick.
So that's reminding that we've already done this. The EDC has already done this once.
Well, the principles that are in that MOU don't cover these areas of expenditure, right? But we do have an MOU that we could then just add some clauses to. Right. Okay, good. Thank you. Patrick?
Just to understand the scope of what we're talking about, what are the numbers?
Well,
we haven't talked about any kind of numbers, so I can understand, what numbers are we talking about, just as a general overview?
Well, Beth is going to talk about the specific grants, and this is intentionally doesn't include those numbers because there's the word sum. It's some of the costs of the chamber, and so we need to figure out what is it, if we were to go down this path, what is an appropriate amount. I mean, I think we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. Let's put it that way, not hundreds of dollars or hundreds of thousands.
But are we talking about $10,000? Are we talking about $70,000? Big difference.
I don't know.
Okay, all right. It's kind of hard to comprehend what you're talking about without having some sense of dollars. So.
Well, here are a couple of quick numbers. The Welcome Center costs about $37,000 to run. The town gives the chamber, or will give the chamber in the next fiscal year, $35,000. The grant requests that Beth is going to talk about tonight are $18,000. In the past year, Beth, what have we granted to the chamber?
14,000.
14,000.
Well, that does not include the Christmas lights and.
Right. So maybe 20 or 25, something like that. So, and we're not suggesting we add all those numbers up or take pieces of them. Those are the things in the pot that have been done in the past in an ad hoc fashion.
No, it gives scope. That's good. That's what I wanted to know.
Okay. So that's sort of the context. Julia, quick comment, and then we'll sort of start the discussion with the application of the grants, but decide then how to describe it. Julia, go ahead. You're muted. So. Wait, Julia, you're still muted. Here, I'll click. This might help. There you go.
Sorry, I didn't realize that I was looking at my own email that you sent. Anyway, I was in a different mode. So I was pressing the space bar and it was doing nothing. I was very confused. So my only point is, John, I think these principles are excellently considered, and I completely agree that the chamber should be compensated for some of the costs of the services that they provide to the town, because they're benefiting everyone, but bear some of the costs themselves as well. My only point is to that line that there's a third category there as well. Some of the services that the chamber provides to the town benefit the full town and are in line with the EDC's priorities that we've developed in front of the public over time, adhering to public input, et cetera. And some of those services that they provide to the town that benefit everyone may not necessarily be exactly in line with the EDC. So to my eye, there are three categories, not only two, right? There are the things that benefit everyone that are in line with what the EDC prioritizes. There are things that they do that benefit the town that are not necessarily in line with what the EDC prioritizes, but that benefit everyone as well. And there are things that only benefit chamber members. So that's my only comment on these overall principles.
Fair enough. And when we would get into the kind of the details of what these mean, and in particular what the first one means, because the rest of them are pretty clear, we would need to take that into account. Yeah. Okay.
I just have a question to Julia. What the second category, what benefits the community but is not in line with the EDC's? Can you give an example, please?
Honestly, I can't right now. I'm only thinking about the fact that the EDC has put a focus that we have considered things like housing and like childcare, things that benefit the people, the employees that work in stores, not necessarily the stores' profits themselves, if that makes sense. I'm thinking more structural versus, John, help me out if you have any words.
Like commercial or so. Well, I think if I can sort of intermediate here, I think the basic point is that we would want to make, as an EDC, if we have to make sure that the funds we're granting, whether it's to any grantee or through a process like this, are being used for priorities that we've set. I
agree and I understand, but I'm just trying to follow the conversation and Julia's reasoning, because I'm trying to find an example of something that is within the chamber's scope, benefits the whole community, but does not fall under the EDC's purview. It's just, it's okay if you don't have it. I was just
I'll
trying
think
to follow
about it, and it's a good question, and I will think about it.
Okay. All right.
They kind of go against each other. Supports the community, but doesn't support the EDC. I'd be very curious to see what you come up with as well.
All right. Well, let's just agree that if she can come up with something that we would, we need to take it into account. It might be the null set, but let's, Joe, Joe, you get the last comment here, and then I do want to let Beth present these, and then we'll come back to this discussion. But Joe, go ahead.
Well, I think we're involved with really two separate discussions here. One is the grant that's being presented before us right now, which in my view really addresses a hardship that the chamber endured because of the COVID, and they just weren't able to earn the money they typically do during healthy years. I think that's a separate issue as to how the EDC should participate in supporting the chamber on an annual basis. And to get into that discussion, I guess a little bit more involved, I think we'd have to look at their budget, where they spend money, how it applies to the EDC or the community, and what would, in the budget, justify our financial involvement with them. So I think right now, we're talking about two different things. One, I think we can address tonight based on the hardship that the chamber has suffered because of the COVID, and a separate discussion, I think, probably involved with another meeting to discuss the involvement that the EDC should play on an annual basis. Two different things, in my view.
No, that's exactly right. They're definitely two different things. I brought this up on the possibility that we might want to work out the principles before we responded to the grants. But I think there's some argument for doing that. But I also think there's an argument for doing it in the opposite order, of responding to the grants and then working out the principles. And so I'm okay with either one. So what I'll do is let Beth explain the grants. We'll ask questions about the grants. And then I'll ask the EDC members to say, do we want to deal with the grants tonight, or not? And I'm fine, personally, I'm fine with whatever decision we make on that. And then we'll decide to, how to move ahead on the principles. So Beth, go ahead and explain those.
Thank you. First of all, I agree with Joe and I think with everyone that these are two separate issues. And I think that we are far beyond the time that we should be discussing how we work together beyond the website, because I think we have that down very well. And so now it's it's time to look beyond that. I will say two things to you that today I had a young couple from North Carolina come in at 9:30 this morning with about a 3-year-old, and they wanted to move here. They were looking in Barnard, Woodstock, etc. We talked about the school system. We talked about Dartmouth Hitchcock, about all the amenities that we have. I was with them for about 40 minutes. I then made a referral to Katie's blog with the interview of the young family that also moved here, and to really write to Katie directly, since they have children about the same age and moved here because of the area. So those are things that the chamber's doing on a regular basis. The day before, I had a gentleman from Washington State want information about moving here, so I put a packet together. That said, I think that we were not quite prepared for this pandemic as the whole community. So first of all is the Taste of Woodstock. Last year, the Taste of Woodstock grossed about $8,300. And from that, we paid for table rentals and all kinds of things that go with the Taste of Woodstock, as well as with all of our musicians, because that's part of the Taste of Woodstock. And we were left with $46.31. And what we are asking for is, with the grant, because the governor specifically said we could not have a festival or a fair at that time, the replacement of the income. The chamber has been working with just myself since the end of March, and continues to serve, I think, the community pretty well. There are things that get to the bottom of the list clearly, but we've had 2 very successful sidewalk sales, working with David Green, supporting the community. The market on the green is continuing and has been very successful this year. And we've been doing that with 1 person and 8 hours of Kathy's time for the market on the green. So the first request is for $4,631 to make up what we think would be the difference between the income minus the expenses for 2020. And I'm happy to answer questions with that. Or do you want me to talk about them all?
Yeah, why don't you talk about them all, Beth,
Okay.
because I think it'll be.
Okay. The second one, which really should have been the first one, was the pasta dinner. Pasta dinner was for the last 26 years has been in correlation with the Covered Bridges Half Marathon. So on Saturday evening, we have had a very successful pasta dinner. Last year we raised, I don't know, we serve about 350 runners and their families and community members at Suicide 6. And last year we raised $7,697. And we are asking, so that was the first thing that hit the first week in June. So we would have had that money to help pay for an administrative assistant person in the office, as well as, you know, for some of the other things that we do. So that's gone. And the final one, I think I'd rather not, I don't want to talk about the back rent as much as, because it's in a different category than the actual pandemic related deficit from the Taste of Woodstock and Pasta Supper. And I think I'd rather talk about the rent after that, if we could.
Okay, that's fine. I agree. It's a different category and a different rationale. All right, let me start with EDC members. Any comments or questions for Beth? Michael, are you raising your hand or?
Yeah, I guess I'm unclear, and I probably have been for some while, on what the MOU is between the EDC and the chamber. And so, I read briefly through the MOU today between the town and the chamber, but I don't know, between EDC and chamber, and then therefore, like, who's responsible for the bailout? Is it EDC? Is it the town? And adding to that, Beth, are your expenses significantly less due to COVID? Are they higher? I mean, what's changed in your expense category?
The thing that's changed is that we laid off a person, we furloughed someone. So I've been just running as fast as I can, doing all the things at the Welcome Center, sometimes not answering the phone, sometimes, if you came in at any given time, it could be very chaotic. The MOU is with the town and the chamber for the website. And it's specifically related to the website that we pay X dollars, you pay X dollars, and Katie works for you and does her job description, and I make changes for my job description. So we work together, and we have a website committee that meets every 2 months to look at the statistics, to see what changes need to be made, upgrades, anything like that.
It relates to website and marketing, basically. That
Is there an MOU between the EDC and the chamber, or is it just that the EDC is an extension of the town?
I think it's the latter.
Yeah. Isabel?
Okay.
I just want to jump in maybe to explain to Michael the big picture of the chamber's finances. We get a big chunk of our monies, our income from membership dues, and other big chunk from events, which are pretty much all profitable. And then until now, all the grants that we've gotten from the EDC were pretty much passed through. We put up the flowers, so the EDC pays for the flowers, same for lights, etc. The only thing that the EDC does not pay for is for the labor and the time that our staff puts into actually coordinating the flowers, coordinating the lights, and doing all that. Until now, the chamber, which is not its purpose to make money, it never made money, but it kind of broke even because we had events and we had things that, made it work month to month, but it still worked. With the events gone now, we don't have that extra money that we absolutely need to keep our staff on. And until now, the economy was kind of slow. Visitors were slow, I would say, until maybe the beginning of August. But now Beth is extremely stretched thin, fielding requests that are really directed to the whole town. And this really has nothing to do with events per se, since events are not happening. It just happens that because of the structure of our finances, we haven't had that extra money, and we've had to furlough our assistant who would field most of those requests. And it's becoming pretty much untenable for Beth now to do the minimum job that she does, not just for the chamber, but for the community at large. And I just want to take an example that you can all relate to is Wassel Weekend. Everybody's wondering what Wassel Weekend is going to look like. Well, Beth is working on that. And when you're trying to reinvent something that you want it to be as spectacular as it used to be, but it has to be entirely different, it takes a ton of time and energy in thought, in contacting people, in sourcing different things, in reaching out to people who might have ideas and the bandwidth to make things happen when you've never done it before. And the reason why we're asking is that we really need to rehire some staff, and we really need to keep Beth on staff, because if we can't keep Beth on staff, then the whole town is, not doomed, but it won't look the same. So that's why, this is why we what we're presenting events, but it's not really, I don't know if this is clear to you. The events, we're missing out on these $15,000 or $18,000 that we're asking for. Or 15, or I don't know how much it amounts to. Does this make sense?
Courtney, thanks, Isabel. So Michael, does that answer your question about the MOU and the?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I was just thinking, gosh, if there's fewer events happening, at least from whatever February until now, I was just wondering if the chamber's expenses have gone down and therefore their, need for maybe they have a smaller budget would work for them, but apparently that's not the case.
Well, their expenses have gone down. It's just their revenues have gone down more.
Yes, we have members, we have struggling members out there, businesses, restaurants, lodging establishments who are at 50% of capacity, who are at zero capacity in April and May and June, that have, the chamber dues come after their purveyors, their electric bill, their staff time. So yeah, we have chamber members who still want to be, that are good members, and I'm sure will pay us, but we're at the bottom of the list because you know what it is like to run a business. You have to pay Comcast first.
Yeah.
Right, and our dues are down significantly, but we're not obviously asking the EDC to subsidize that. We're making it our problem. So we are keeping a big share of the burden as well.
Yeah. Courtney?
Yeah, two things. One is just the chamber has no cash reserves, never really did. So it's not like some businesses in the good economy had some cash reserves who have all seen it depleted, but completely. So just think how much tougher that is. But the question is, the state relief fund, was there any toward the chamber that was allotted for the chamber?
I'm sorry, the state relief number is what?
State relief funding, was there any that was allocated toward that you could possibly grab onto?
Not specifically. The chamber was not eligible for a PPP grant or loan or an EIDL loan because we're a 501c6 organization. We have applied for a marketing grant to do a specific program. There is no admin costs allowed in that grant. We're looking for a passport program to drive people into businesses. And we applied for it specifically so that we could use everything had to be done locally at a little higher cost. And so we have applied for that. We have not heard. We won't know to the middle of September.
Have you talked to Betsy at all, just to clarify on the chamber side?
Regularly.
Yeah.
We meet regularly.
I wouldn't give up on that too either. Just keep pushing and keep working with Betsy on that because there's a lot of funds that just haven't been allocated yet.
Well, the chamber, as a chamber, as an organization of 30 chambers in the state of Vermont, have made a request and has testified to the legislature asking for $1 million of that CARES money to go to chambers specifically. That we're not looking real hopeful with that, but we are working in that direction. If we got that, that would be great, but I don't think so.
All right, thank you. Other questions or comments from EDC members?
Yeah, to my eye,
Julia and then Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, to my eye, these are two very different issues like that we're talking about here. I think that issuing a grant for recovering lost income on events that had to be canceled due to the pandemic is in my mind one thing, and there's a pretty clear answer to that in my opinion. But something like back rent is something slightly different, and I don't know that I feel capable of really assessing that right now.
I think that may be why Beth so let's just keep focus on the first before we get to the second one, because I think Beth also feels that it's a different category. I happen to agree with you. It's sort of a different category. Joe?
Yeah, in that vein, I'm wondering if it might be helpful to think of the chamber as not specifically the chamber, as just another entity in town, and its value to the community, and is experiencing an income shortfall because of the pandemic, and based our decision upon that, and bring part two up at a later time. I mean, I'm wondering if it might be simpler to think of it that way.
I'm guessing that no one's spoken against that, so I'm guessing that's the way we'll go. But any other comments or questions before we kind of assess before we vote on this and decide whether to vote on it and then vote on it? Any other comments? Any folks, non-EDC folks, want to make a comment? If you're not on video, Sally, if you're not on video, I was going to say, just please unmute yourself or raise your hand somehow. Sally, go ahead.
The only thing that I'm wondering is if you guys decide to fund these. I mean, you have put away 100,000 for COVID-related expenses. I'm just wondering if these type of, instead of being a grant request, are these part of the COVID funding $100,000 that you've already put aside?
I think that's a very good question, a very good point. And let me suggest that, yeah, I think that's a very good point. Any other comments or questions?
John, can you explain the difference there? I'm not aware of what that.
Okay, so from a budgeting, from an resource allocation point of view, we decided in March or February to set aside $100,000 on top of the other commitments we've made for COVID-19 related things. We then decided to use that $100,000 to fund $1,000 loans, which could be converted and would likely be converted into grants. We've granted 46 of those, 46,000. We have 54,000 left. The first two grants that Beth has described for Taste of Woodstock and Pasta Supper would add up to 13,300. We have 54,000 left. Should we consider this to be a $13,300 grant from the Business Relief Fund? Would that set a precedent for other businesses and so forth? I don't know that it would, but I think that's a good way to think about it personally.
So do I agree. That's a good way to think of it.
Okay. Any non-EDC members want to briefly comment? Because I think we're ready to. All right, let me just ask, I have a sense that despite the fact that I put out the policies and the principles, I have a sense, at least from the folks who have spoken, that you'd rather vote on these, for at least these first two tonight, and then deal with the principles as a separate issue. Is there anyone who objects to that? No. Okay. Then can I have a motion to approve? I think we can do in one motion. Sorry. Does anyone? I'd like to take Sally up on her suggestion that we consider this funded from the Business Relief Fund. That doesn't preclude us from adding funds to the 100,000 if the demand shifts and we really need it. So it's really just which accounting category we take it from. I think it is precisely the intent of the Business Relief Fund, which is why I think Sally may have brought that up. So does anyone object if we were to use those funds, at least for now? Julia's saying no. Okay. Well, then I'll make the motion. Is the chair allowed to make a motion, Sally? You're muted, but.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Joe, go ahead.
I'll make the motion that we use the funds from the balance we have from the Business Relief Fund and use that to support the Chamber's grants.
The two grants, the Taste of Woodstock and the Pasta Supper for 13,300.
Right.
Is there a second? Anyone want a second?
Seconded.
Julia, second. All right, all in favor? Show me your hands, please, so I can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Michael? But you're not, any opposed?
I don't know. I got a question about this one. I don't know if now's the time to ask it.
Well, what? Well, I probably should have said after the motion was made, is there any discussion? So I'm going to allow that. I think that was my fault. So go ahead, Michael, with your question.
Yeah, I mean, can we just do that? Can we just switch that 100,000 that's been allocated for $1,000 grants because there might have been a business that could have come to us wanting $5,000, and then we restricted them to $1,000. But all of a sudden, now we can expand it. I mean, I don't know where the rules are.
There, from a technical point of view, we set the rules. And so, I mean, the select board will have to approve everything we do tonight, and they approve those rules. And I think my argument to the select board would be, this is very consistent with the spirit of what it is. We see the pattern of funding for the 100,000. It has petered out. Not petered out, sorry. It has.
Yeah, this is more from just a procedural standpoint is what I was thinking.
No, I think from a procedural standpoint, Sally, unless you have a different degree, I think since the select board would have to approve this, I think we're within our rights to propose it.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I would go back and look at the wording of the actual motion that was made when you established the fund. I can't pull that up that quickly right now, but I will think.
Well, let me suggest that if it does require, if recommending this to the select board does require another motion to, why don't we include in this motion that if necessary, we'll modify the language of the Business Relief Fund in order to allow for this to occur.
Good. That's fine.
Courtney or Julia, did you want to add further discussion on this motion?
I just want to say and kind of speak to Michael's comment is the chamber, some of these events that they do, especially Wassail, benefits so many companies in town. So it's not, we're actually kind of helping out a lot of companies at once. So that's where I feel good about doing something a little extraordinary because of that, as opposed to being one particular business looking for $1,000.
Yeah, I agree. So, all right. Any other further discussion of the motion? We have a motion on the table. All right. Hearing none, then all in favor, please raise your hands. Show me your hands. 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so there are none opposed. We don't need a roll call. Okay. Any opposed? No, none. So the motion passes unanimously. All right, Beth. Now for the third grant. Excuse me. Back then.
I can speak to that, and I think it came about specifically after a discussion at the last select board meeting, when we asked for our rent to be lowered for this time, and I don't really remember how it came about, but there was a question about, well, maybe the EDC would, that might be a role for the EDC because the select board is looking to make up $70,000 or $75,000 that they owe to the school. So I don't mean to be passing the buck, but that's kind of where the thought came from. And I don't know if Isabel or Ray want to speak more to it.
I can sort of explain, but I'll just repeat what Beth just said. We have been really trying to take a close look at our finances, and as we explained to the select board, 2019 we had some cash flow issues that we were working through. Beginning of 2020 looked good, and with the thing is that structurally the town would vote $25,000 for us to maintain the Welcome Center, but the Welcome Center really costs us $36,000. So there's an $11,000 delta that year after year we were able to cover because of successful events and strong membership. And there was just a little cash flow issue in 2019. We built up some back rent that was due. It's not very clean, but we were going to pay that back to the town in 2020. But then, as you know, COVID hit and that changed the whole game. So we're looking at our finances, trying to clean everything up. We met with the town. We then brought it to the select board saying, what can we do? So the select board was kind enough to agree for our current rent to lower it to $250 until the end of the year and see where everything stands at that point. So half our current rent we're paying at half the price that was agreed upon. And then there was a discussion among the select board as to where to find, what do they do with those $6,000 that is past due. And maybe Mary can explain that, but then one of the one of the persons on the select board said, well, maybe this is something for you to bring to the EDC. Why don't you see if the EDC has any funds for that? That's a summary of the situation where we're in, right? Is that correct, Mary? Yes, okay.
So just a brief process, or just to connect this request to the comments that Joe and particularly Julia made about the difference between one-time COVID-related items and longer-term issues. I think the principles that I was proposing we adopt or develop and finalize are really to set long-term funding model, and as part of that, to have the chamber basically say, we can live within this model. This is sustainable for us, and we'll be able to make it work. And it seems to me that the back rent is part of the cleaning up of creating that sustainable situation. I don't know whether you need the 6,000 to be sustainable or you don't, but it seems to me that could be part of the discussions that we hold to try to figure out this, you know, this point about what does it mean for some of the costs. And so I would argue, particularly since the way this issue was brought up, that we not try to answer the question tonight of whether, does the EDC have $6,000 in the bank? Yes. But the real question is, does the chamber need this to be sustainable, and what should it be paying for in the future, and what should we be paying for? And that, I think, is really, as Joe and Julia have suggested, is a separate discussion. So I would like to, my view is that we should not grant this tonight, and that we should consider it, perhaps we should then move to the larger issue of sustained funding over time and how should we be splitting it. But other people may disagree. So let me just ask first EDC members how you feel about postponing and possibly not dealing with this grant because we'll deal with it in the context of this larger principal issue, or dealing with it. Does anybody have a feeling one way or the other? Larry?
Yeah, I guess I looked at it differently. I looked at it as an interesting selection of reasons why the chamber was having financial difficulties during COVID, but sort of lumped them together in my head that these were all essentially COVID-related issues, one-time issues that we should just help them out with, or subsidize their
losses.
Their losses, and on a one-time basis, and that it wasn't, to me, it wasn't particularly helpful to know precisely why they were asking for these individual pieces, rather than to say they needed roughly $18,000 currently because they sustained losses because of COVID, and that seemed like a reasonable request. Your principles, I think, are definitely need to be looked at, but I would think looked at later on separately.
Okay.
I just look at it as sort of a bucket of problems that they've come up with that total X amount of dollars, one time COVID related, even though back rent wasn't, they didn't get the back rent problem during COVID. They did have a process to take care of it with prospective income that never happened because of COVID.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just sort of looked at it that way.
Okay, fair enough. Any other EDC members want to come down on one side or the other? That's Julia.
I tend to agree with what you initially said. I don't necessarily feel great about approving a rent subsidy essentially for the chamber right now at this moment without setting some parameters in place about what the EDC funds that the chamber does and what the EDC does not fund that the chamber does. We've gotten a lot of requests for things from the chamber, most of which I've very much gotten behind, because in most instances, I think that they really do align with the EDC's priorities. But to my eye, while I can't cite an example to Isabella and Patrick's very apt question of coming up with a concrete example, I can't cite one, but I would say that the EDC's priorities do diverge significantly from the chambers in a number of different ways. And so I think having some sense of overall, what are the parameters of this relationship? How are the finances going to be intertwined and how are they going to be separate? I think that that's an important thing to set out before doing something like subsidizing rent.
All right, anyone, Beth, hold on one second. I'm going to see if there are other EDC folks, and then I'll call on you first after that. Any other comments from the EDC members? Okay, Beth, go ahead.
Okay, I just, to Larry's point, I think we could say 5 months was COVID related. So if you go from March, April, May, June, July, all COVID, $2,500. I think that that would be fair, and I think the rest the chamber owns, and we would be able to do the balance. Just as a thought.
Having real-time negotiations, that's very exciting. Isabel?
I just want to say all the points are valid, but I just want to say I don't see the back rent as being part of the future conversation, because I sure hope that we won't be in this position again, and that, you know, the back rent is more a relationship to COVID, and, you know, we'll be happy to take whatever you give us, obviously, if you can't cover the whole of it. But it's not, I don't see us bundling the conversation on the back rent in the future conversation, the conversation about our future relationship.
I accept that point that you and Larry basically made. I think that's a fair point. So, Courtney?
So let me get this straight. The back rent is supposed to go back to the town.
So we would be giving the money to the town, in effect.
So we are the town.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but we'd be giving it to a different group of people within the town.
Yeah, so it just seems odd to me. when it has to be a relief world right now, and start thinking about that. So
Well, that group's trying to fill a $75,000 gap.
yeah,
That's the problem.
I mean, as a practical matter, the select board has left the EDC funds, you know, for economic development. They could seize them, but they haven't, you know, and so this, and they have their own problems. And so this would be either a $2,500 or a $6,000 relief for Mary and team.
But
John,
the town gives,
the
go ahead.
select board cannot,
Sally first, then Larry.
the select board cannot seize the EDC funds. The way that the EDC was set up to use those funds were very specific for what they are being used for right now. The select board cannot just take them.
No, sorry, that's a very good point. Well, the select board would have to use them. Yes, the select board would have to use them for the purposes for which they were intended, which is economic development. So, yes, a good point. Thank you for that. I've actually made that point myself in the past, and I should not have digressed from it. Larry?
Oh, I was just going to respond to Courtney. I totally agree with you. It seems odd, but the town gives the chamber $25,000, now $35,000. They turn around and pay the town back rent. I mean, it's all kind of kind of an accounting, or I don't know what the issue is. But
right, but it's not our issue.
It's
right.
not our issue. It's just that same Peter and Paul kind of thing that
right.
Courtney's talking about.
Well, we'll let the select board deal with it. So, all right. So, Ray, are you muted?
I just want to say the town doesn't give us that. It gets voted on at the election. So it's not in the town's budget to give us that money every year. We have to get signatures, and then it goes on the Australian ballot.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's a special article. It's funded through a special article, or it has been in the past. Okay, so there are two suggestions here. One is to it seems like I'm the only one. I accept the argument that this is not part of the longer term discussion. So it seems like there's a consensus, unless anyone disagrees, we should vote on this grant request this evening. Seeing no disagreement, the request was for $6,000, and then the grant applicant suggested that it could be for $2,500. Does someone want to make a motion on either amount that we will then vote on? And we can vote on both if there are two motions.
I will move that we grant $2,500 for the back rent.
I'll second that.
All right, there's a second. Is there any further discussion? No, all right.
Let me ask you something.
Yes, go ahead, Michael.
What about, I mean, if the chamber is going to have to pay the town back the remainder of that, if we approve just 2,500, could you structure it where we grant them the money now so they can pay it, and then over time they pay us back the remainder? Is that something that the chamber would be interested in?
So can you, right now, I don't think that we have any plans on, if we don't get these funds, we are several months from repaying those $6,000. So, you know,
So I was saying we give you whatever the total is 6,000 now.
Yes.
And
so we give it to the town because we owe it to the town.
Yeah, so it goes to the town, right?
Right.
And then over maybe a 12-month period, you're paying back the 3,500 to the EDC. Over time. It's just like, you know, kind of half of it's a loan. I don't know if that's an option.
That becomes, I don't know, what do you think, Beth? I think that becomes a little complicated at this point, and maybe that's where it gets rolled into the future conversation.
Well, excuse me, but
it's just to cover your debts now.
Well, wait, no.
Right. But our creditor is not trying to push us out of where we are.
Right. So in effect, they're borrowing it from the town if they don't borrow it from us. Ray, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say we are negotiating with the town that we have the back rent put on the back of the grant, that the loan that the town received, and pay it then, because we can't, in all right, you know, likelihood, we can't just say we're going to come up with this money in the next 12 months. So we need the rent relief until we get our feet under us again.
In effect, what we're debating, correct me if I'm wrong, is actually whether or not the town will get the use of this money. Because if we don't give the chamber the 6,000, they're not yet certain that they will pay that money back to the town. And the town isn't going to kick them out of the Welcome Center, so it will just remain a loan from the town to the chamber. So, so I think, Michael, your idea of some of it being a loan has already been implemented by the town.
Yeah.
Just trying to help out.
An extra layer that makes things more complicated. I think it's, you know, either the whole 6,000 or we just keep in our conversation. And I think from my understanding of the select board decided to table their decision on the back rent until the EDC had this conversation.
Right.
So if the EDC doesn't want to go into their coffers and give us the 6,000 that we can give back to the town, then we'll just figure it out with the town.
Okay. So, all right. So we can vote against or for this motion, and we can consider another motion after this. But is there any further discussion? We have a motion on the table to grant $2,500 for this, in effect, to the town to cover that portion of the back rent from the chamber. Any other
Can I just ask who seconded that motion? Larry made the motion. I didn't hear who seconded it.
Yeah, Courtney seconded it, I think. Yeah, he's seconding it now, but I believe he seconded it before also.
I did. I seconded it originally.
Julia, do you have?
I just had a question. So I'm not clear. Beth said that 2,500 would be helpful, and Isabel just said that 2,500 would not be accepted or helpful. So I'm just confused about what before we vote on anything.
I agree.
What I said is that 2,500 can be directly related to the COVID. that it would take in March through July with down income, no PPP loan or grant, no EIDL loan or grant, and that it would get some of our debt down so that it would be more manageable to look at the budget going forward to 2021 and figure out with the select board how to pay back the balance. Nobody, myself the first one, likes to see that on my balance sheet, that we owe the town $6,000.
So Julia, does that answer your question? Patrick, well, hold on one second.
Not 100%, but so is that what you're asking for right now at this point, or is that not? Like I'm.
I think she was trying to help you through the thought process of being COVID related. And so you have 5 months at $500 that are
get
during
that.
COVID from March to August. That's $2,500. So if that helps you in your decision making, then maybe you could divide that and say, is that correct, Beth? That it's.
I understand that. I do understand that very clearly. I just am not clear about what you're asking for right now. Because
well, they've made a grant for 6,000 and Larry's made a motion to grant them 2,500. I think that's
and I made my motion based on what Beth said, which sounded like that's what they wanted. So I'm with Julia on this.
Okay, let's see if we can resolve this in fairly short order. Patrick, Eddie, do you want to?
Yeah, I think the chamber brings a lot of benefit to the town, and I think a lot more benefit to the town than they actually get back. They struggle to get membership. I was part of helping with that before. Lots of people are like, well, why should I pay? I get the benefit anyway. So my thought is here that we should think of this as you're helping the town. You're not just helping the chamber. And I would grant the 6,000. I don't think any business is going to be upset about that. They're the organization I think that drives a lot of the businesses, a lot of the people here. So I would seriously think about granting them the full 6,000.
All right, why don't we do this? In order to just make the process smoother, why don't we just go around, as it's not a vote, we're still waiting to vote on this motion, but let's just go around and ask between 0, 2,500 and 6,000, if that was the choice. I'll just ask each EDC member which you would prefer, if you have a preference. I'm going to go around clockwise on my screen. So Joe, you're first. 0, 2,500 or 6,000, what would you prefer?
2,500.
Julia?
2,500.
Courtney?
2,500, but I don't disagree with Patrick. I think we should look at it further down the road, another round.
Okay. Larry?
I made the motion.
Okay. Well, no, but so, okay, so your answer is 2,500.
Well, I'm still confused as to what they're asking for. I understand the rationale that Beth gave us, and that's why I made the motion.
I think they're asking for 2,500, Larry.
No, we asked for 6,000, but we'll take what you give us.
So Larry, given that, so I think that actually answered Julia's question. They're asking for 6,000.
Okay, I would go for 6,000.
Michael, I skipped over you, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I'm gonna go with 2,500 because it's COVID related, and that makes sense to me. And I think a better solution has to happen, but maybe for the remainder, that's up to the select board, and hopefully they can figure something out.
Okay, and I'm at 2,500 as well, understanding if I take Michael's and Courtney's comment that we could consider, it could be up to the select board. I wouldn't rule out further emergency aid to the chamber in the future because of Patrick's comment. I think we all want the chamber to survive and to become sustainable. Okay, so at least from a process point of view, most of us would prefer this motion. So we're going to vote on this motion, and then if someone wants to make another motion, they can. So we have had a motion made and seconded to grant $2,500 to cover back rent for the chamber. All those in favor? 5, 6. Okay, none opposed, so it passes. Okay, does anyone at this time want to make an additional $3,500 motion? We would, okay, I think the sentiment of the group, if I can speak, if anyone disagrees, is that we understand the financial situation you're in. We want the chamber to survive. You've got to deal with some of your problems. But if, you know, we'll deal with future emergency requests if they come up. So, okay. Thank you. Back to the agenda just briefly. Let me share this.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you. Competitive bidding requirements for EDC and grantees. I drafted a motion for us to consider, sorry, let me step back. The town has a competitive bidding, has a purchasing policy, which describes how the town should make purchases. It includes how to run a competitive bidding process and when the town can set aside the competitive bidding process, under what circumstances it's allowed to do that, and how it has to justify that, and so forth. The purchasing policy does not anticipate the existence of the EDC. And in particular, it doesn't anticipate the existence of EDC-led projects like Teagle's Landing, where we are in effect granting ourselves funding. It seems convoluted and not in the spirit of the law, of the policy, to say that if the EDC is spending $85,000 to fix up Teagle's Landing rather than the town, that we don't have to abide by the purchasing policy. And particularly since it's the select board that actually makes the decision, the select board is bound by that purchasing policy. The policy itself is not really actionable for the EDC because it says things like the town manager will do this work, and so things that EDC members should actually be doing. And so we need to have some slightly different wording. But the reason for raising this issue is several of us, Larry and I in particular, but there may be others, I think, who we haven't talked in detail to a lot of others, would like to clarify this and basically say that that the EDC needs to follow the same purchasing policy that the town follows, but we need to change some of the wording of the actual logistical process that the policy requires. Like who do the bids get sent to, you know, and who evaluates them, and so forth. And we don't want to dump a huge amount of work on the town when, on the management team or on the select board, when it really should be EDC who's doing that work. So we need to one second, Patrick. So we need to adopt that policy, and the motion that I made does not quite fully articulate what that should be. So once again, at the last meeting, we said we would push it, we would decide this meeting, and I'd actually like to suggest we set this aside and come back with specific language to achieve this objective, unless there are people on the committee who think that this is not a good objective to achieve. I will say one thing, that the purchasing policy does allow the town, and therefore would allow us, quite considerable latitude to operate projects in a reasonable way that would both make sure that the town got value for its money, but would also not impose too much of a bureaucracy on the town or on us. That there are perfectly reasonable ways to, to not have a huge, big public process when it's something that there's an obvious provider of a professional service that we would want to select because it's in the best interest of the town. So I don't think we would end up tripping over ourselves. I think it was a good policy and gives the government enough discretion to run things the way they think is best for the town. So the motion is actually, I'd like to withdraw the motion because we're not really ready to put all the language in place. But I would like to get any feedback if there is any other, if anyone disagrees with the direction we're going down, then you can speak up now. Patrick, let me just ask EDC members if anyone has an opinion about what I've just said. And if so, or please give us some guidance. If not, we'll continue down the same path and vote at the next meeting with a policy that's clearly articulated. And I'm sorry, it should have been this time, but I screwed up a little bit. So does anyone have a point of strong feelings about the direction in which we're heading here?
So let me get this straight. What you want to do is just clarify the language on the existing policy. Is that correct?
Correct. We want to take the town policy, now that an EDC exists, to basically kind of mirror it and say, if this is an EDC project, here's how we will follow the same principles, but here are some slightly different logistics because it's the EDC, not the select board or not the town manager. You know, it's whatever. We'll put forward an appropriate set of substitutes to mimic the town policy.
With that policy being in place, applied to other projects besides Teagles Landing. In other words, if somewhere down the road we want to buy more trash cans, more benches, whatever.
Yeah, well, actually, Sally put together a list of past EDC projects that she thought would qualify, and that's included in the materials. There were probably 8 or 9 of them, including, for example, I think the planning grants. Sally, maybe you can just comment briefly.
Yeah, I don't have that. I don't know if I actually put that in the Dropbox or not, but there are at least a dozen projects that the EDC has already done that went out to either a bid or a invitation project. So we're already doing this for some of the projects. All the professional services were invited, and people were solicited and given an RFP and invited. So I think it's happening even for the River Loop Trail. We solicited bids for that as well. So it's already happening. It's not that big a deal. It's a good way to do business. So I think it should be done for all projects, and it's not that hard.
Well, my question isn't about past projects. My question is about future projects. If this policy is refined and adopted, would it apply to all future projects, including Teagles Landing?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, that's the point. That's the point. Okay. Any other comments from the EDC before I call on Patrick?
Yeah, John, what needs to be mentioned is that there, in your motion, you have set up slightly different criteria for projects that are going to grantees that are not EDC projects.
Yeah. Sorry, that's a good point. Yeah, and so the correct. Thank you. So the direction in which we're heading, and again, accepting feedback on this, is that we would be asking grantees to we would not be requiring them to follow the purchasing policy. I believe that that's very unusual, but we would be requiring them to answer a basic question that said that they have thought about, in effect, the value for money, and that they are making a decision that they think is the best use of the funds, or they've chosen to follow the policy, one or the other. They can, in fact, choose to follow the bidding policy if they would like. But if they don't, then they have to say to us that they've assessed the situation and decided that the vendors that they're picking are sort of a good value for money. The reason for having a much lighter touch for grantees, first of all, is that I think it's very unusual to have grantees required to follow a municipal bidding process. But secondly, is that it's their incentive to do so, because the grants are competitive. We have more demand for grants than there is funding, and they are incented to submit the smallest possible grant that they think they can get, where they can achieve their objectives. So there's a natural mechanism to ensure that they get value for money. So that's a good point, Larry. That's sort of the direction we're heading, to require of ourselves that we follow the policy on all projects, and that for our grantees that we ask them to please remember that this is government funding and that they should either follow the policy or state that they are getting value for money. So, does anyone object to that direction, or have a comment of how to alter it on the EDC? Okay, Patrick, sorry, you were patiently waiting.
No, that's okay. I think you actually answered my question, because it sounded like you were going to have people we're giving grants to need to 3-bid as well.
Yeah.
And so now, because I think that would be a little onerous for somebody trying to get a couple $1,000s to have to go, but anyway,
Well,
so you answered it.
Okay, fine. It only applies for things above 3,000, so it wouldn't. But yes, it's for 3,001. It's onerous as well.
So it would be all projects that the EDC runs.
Correct. Where we are spending our own money. A planning grant, for example, when we ran, where there isn't another organization that we're granting it to. Strategic planning is the best.
It's your project that
Right.
you're running. Got it. Okay, I was checking them. Thank you.
All right. Any last comments on this?
Yeah, hey, John. Yeah, because there's a big misconception out there. There is no requirement for 3 bids anywhere in there. It specifically says there is only a requirement that you get a bid. There's a requirement that you publicize it 4 bids. But I've heard a lot of people say you got to have 3 bids, and that is not in the policy.
Okay. All right. It seems like there's no objection to this, so we'll come back with a specific motion the next time. Okay. We had 3 new items for new business. Sally, can you just remind us what they were?
So you had the state gift certificate, the grant proposal that was submitted, and discussion of 6 o'clock meeting time.
What was the grant proposal that was submitted? What was that?
Said something about a grant proposal that was submitted.
Oh, the grant. Okay, yeah, sorry. So let me just cover the first 2. Let me just actually, we can deal with this offline. Beth, let me just ask Beth. I'm happy to meet with Beth offline and deal with this. Beth, are you aware of the program to give households $30 and to have businesses sign up and all that? Just wait, you're muted.
I'm moderately aware. I've been reading about it, but I don't know details.
Okay. Does anyone mind if you deputize me to do what we can in the next 6 days? I think it's free money for Woodstock and its merchants.
Right.
And it doesn't require us to spend any money. We just have to promote this. And I just suggest that the Chamber and the EDC jointly figure out how to promote it in the listserv and maybe via some emails. And that we just simply notify both residents and merchants that if they sign up for this, there's money available from the state it's not going to end up being a lot of money. It's $30 per person or per person or per house or per resident.
It's per household, I think. And the businesses need to sign up for it.
Right. The businesses have to sign. You can only spend the money at a business that has signed up for it. So,
right.
So the Chamber and the EDC will jointly promote this. And is any objections?
What?
I couldn't hear that, but it sounded like it was a strongly felt view, either positive or negative. I'm going to assume positive. All right.
What?
Okay.
Yelling out his door. I think that's what he's doing.
Oh.
Can you hear him, Courtney?
I can many times.
Thank you so much.
Secondly, September 1st was the deadline. No, August 31st was the deadline to submit a grant, a marketing grant, to develop, to market communities. And class 4, is Jeff on the call here? There he is. So Charles Kahn, who is a partner at class 4, and that's the firm that donated their time to help us build the gift card website, has offered to partner with us to submit a grant request for $10,000 for a $20,000 program. The program would be to develop a certain number of minutes of video content about Woodstock that would be shot in the first 7 to 10 days of October in order to develop video content for the website, long form, like a minute or a minute and a half video, plus shorter things that could be done on social media. Class 4, this is primarily what Class 4 does, using video content to build marketing programs. The total program is about $20,000. The grant request is for $10,000, and Class 4 has agreed to donate the rest. through their time, basically. The $10,000 sort of the out-of-pocket cost to pay for video filming and directors and camera people and so forth. And so I checked with Courtney as the EDC member on the marketing committee, because we found out about this the morning of the day of the deadline. And we managed to submit a joint application with Class 4. I didn't have time to convene a meeting. It's not going to cost the EDC anything. I don't know whether we'll get the grant or not. But if we do, it's something, it will be an interesting way to pilot test some additional content. By the way, the town will own the content, as will, and everyone who's filmed will be, and the merchants in town will all be able to use it as well. So it'll be sort of an open source set of content for Woodstock. So I just really wanted to inform everybody about that. And then lastly, Larry suggested, well, you heard his suggestion. Oh, Michael, you may not have heard it. Larry was asking, since the select board meets at 6 p.m., is there any discussion of us meeting at 6 p.m.? Does Larry disappear? I don't know. There you are. Larry, do you any comments? Do you favor that, or?
I didn't know whether anybody else. Just personally, I'd like it, but I didn't know whether there was a history of it, or I just saw that the select board did it, and I said, "Oh, that's nice." And
does anyone else on the EDC have preferences?
Earlier is nicer, I think. I've always thought it should have been earlier.
Okay. Michael, anything? You have any view?
As long as we stay on Thursdays, I'm fine with it.
Okay. Where's Julia? She disappeared. Oh no, she's off the camera. Sally?
Sorry, I'm here. I just needed food, so and I didn't want to make anyone watch me eat. So I'm fine with whatever.
Okay. Sally, do you have any
No, I'm fine. I think that's okay.
All right, I'm fine as well. Who am I missing? Anyone? No. Okay. I didn't ask Joe. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, then let's until further notice, let's schedule the next meeting at 6 p.m. and we'll keep it at 6 p.m. And then if after 6 months or so there's some downside to that, we can always change it. Okay, Sally, is there any other new business? Sally, are we allowed to, if someone had new business right now, are we allowed to, I don't, but I'm just curious, are we allowed to add it, or we have to add it at the beginning?
Technically, you have to add at the beginning, but I mean.
All right, fine. So then any other comments, citizen comments or other comments? Mary, did you want to say something? Oh, you're muted. Mary, you're muted. Mary's usually, there you go.
I am. I just wanted a question I was asked over the weekend. Are there going to be picnic tables arriving on the green and in other places within the next couple of weeks? I said I thought probably by mid-September.
The most up-to-date information, which is 2 hours old, is that 2 tables have already been added to the green. That was the number that were to be added.
Okay.
The 4 tables, we bought 6, are right there on my driveway.
Oh.
The memorandum of understanding with LCAM Realty, which would allow us to put them on the Trattoria Pie land, arrived in my inbox at 6:50 p.m. today, so 10 minutes before the meeting started. So we are trying, so I will look at it tonight, and Bill or Jeff Connor for the village trustees, or Bill, one of the two of you needs to sign it. I'll bring it over tomorrow. I mean, if we can decide if there are any issues or not. And then as soon as it's done, I'll get some volunteers to bring the tables over. So it could be done by tomorrow. We're trying to get it for this. Well, we're trying to get it for a long time ago, but so it looks like we'll be able to get it in the next day or so.
Someone asked me last weekend. I said probably by mid-September. Thank you.
No. And Beth, sorry, Beth, this is, well, never mind. I'll deal with it offline. But we want to take your table and put it on and give you a new table, brand new. So I'll explain why offline. Okay. Any other comments? No. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Julia, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. We'll end this.